Begin the Dewdrop Tulip charcoal assignment by getting a half sheet of paper, a blending stump, stick of black charcoal, an eraser, whether it's kneaded or a neon one, a white charcoal pencil, and a black charcoal pencil. Make sure the black charcoal pencil that you take is a 2B, not an HB. We're going to start by toning our paper. So after you've put your name on it, you're going to use the stick charcoal to establish a gray tone for your base. You don't want to go all the way to the edge of the picture. You don't want to go all the way to the edge of the paper because you're creating borders within your image. So after you've established your base, you're going to use either a paper towel or a blending stump to blend the charcoal in. We're going to sketch with either your white charcoal or your black charcoal pencil. We're going to make our blossom quite large, and we're going to make the stem go past our toned area and disappear off the bottom. So I'm going to start by making my stem. This is a tulip. They have a pretty sturdy stem. And then the base of the tulip is rounded, so make like a big rounded shape. The texture sounds of the charcoal, you do kind of get used to them. And then we're going to sketch where the top of the blossom is. So it comes all the way up here, make a little wedge. And then we're going to come down so it looks like an egg. We're going to have one of the petals folded over. So I'm going to draw the shape of the petal. It curves. And then it folds down. So we can see the interior of the petal now. It's got a little divot in it. It's starting to unfurl, so it's sticking off of the blossom base a little bit. We're going to draw the interior part of this folded over petal that you can see. It does have a little bump in it where that center ridge is. You can go ahead and sketch part of that in. And then we have another blossom petal over here. And there's a negative space like a teardrop in between them. And this petal has not started to open, so it comes up to a point. And then we have a little bit of our center line here. If you end up making marks that you're not happy with, rather than erasing at this stage, it's really better to just blend it in if you think that I could do this better if I had a blank slate to start on. So you just blend it in with your finger or the blending stump or the tissue. I'm going to draw another petal here that we can see coming from the back of the tulip. And then we have one more petal that's on the interior. It's a multi-layered blossom. Okay. So now the fun part, because we're working in grayscale, we're not using color, but we're going to create the illusion that this tulip has water droplets or dewdrops in it. Before we do that, we're going to add some value to the tulip itself. So we're going to use our charcoal stick. We're just going to add the illusion that it's a three-dimensional form by shading the edges. Remember, there are different size charcoal sticks. They're not all this thickness, so that if it's difficult for you to use the very end of it to stay within an area, make sure you grab a smaller one. I'll leave some of it the tone color, because this is like a black and white photo that you're creating. Right, so colors are translated into values. A little bit of shading on this petal. Got some texture on the inside. The corners on these big charcoal sticks do make it a little bit easier than an oil pastel, for instance, to stay in an area. Go over here. You can rotate your paper too, just so you don't have to worry about putting your hand into the charcoal. You want to look up a reference of a particular tulip and draw it. that is fine. Just make sure you are including the skills and techniques I'm looking for in this assignment. Or even if you wanted to draw a different flower. So for example, you could say, oh, I actually want to make a lily or a crocus, some other kind of spring flower. You could do that. Just make sure that you're drawing from a reference photo, not a drawing. And that you're showing me the shading techniques and the dew effect. Okay, so this is a little bit darker here. It's fairly light on the inside. Add some shading to the edges so it pops. Okay, so when you use your blending stump, you don't want to use the very tip of it. You actually want to use the side. So if you use the side of it, it covers a larger area, it creates a very smooth texture, and it allows other people to use the blending stump. So if your blending stump becomes really, really gross, you can sharpen it with a hand sharpener, or you can use a piece of sandpaper to bring back the shape that it should be, and to take off the excess charcoal that it might have on it. It can be difficult to see what you're blending with all these little bits of charcoal dust. So always remember to tap your paper to remove the charcoal dust. Please do not blow it at each other or onto the floor. The stem, actually, I think I'm just gonna do a little bit of a shadow under the blossom and then blend it out. Okay, I'm going to tap off my excess. Remember, it's healthy to step back from your work and see if it's looking correct. Give yourself some physical distance between yourself and the artwork. I'm going to use my eraser to pick up some of the charcoal so that I have a nice range of values. So the reason I like the kneaded erasers for charcoal is that they never wear out, ever. And you can actually form them into a good sized point to erase more precisely. So if I erase a little bit in here, bring back some lines. Erase on the edges of the fold over so I don't lose it, right? Because if the light hits the top, it makes sense to erase that a little bit. The nice thing about more intense charcoal and graphite skills is that you learn how to layer values to make it look realistic, not relying on color. As you're erasing your charcoal to pick up your highlights, always evaluate what you've done before you continue. You can push down with more pressure as well to pick up even more of the charcoal. You can push broadly across an area to pick up charcoal as well. That does work better with the rubber erasers, not the kneaded erasers. I'm going to lift some more highlights here. Okay, because you have a base under this that we toned, it's not going to pick it up to pure white of the paper unless you're pushing down very hard. The easiest way to actually make it look even brighter is to use your white charcoal pencil. So we're going to go ahead and pop in some highlights on the stem. We'll pop in some highlights here on the petals. So I'm not pushing down super hard. The white charcoal pencil is kind of brittle, just like regular charcoal. And we're going to blend that in. So because my blending stump is covered with black charcoal already, this is the point where I would use a piece of sandpaper to clean it off, or I would use a hand sharpener to clean it off. But I can actually use part of it that's not contaminated. Because I am blending it in with layers of black and gray at this point, it's not a huge deal if there is still black charcoal on my blending stump. You notice that you do get this little piece of charcoal stain on your hand too from the stump. Charcoal will wash off with soap and water. Fear not. Okay, so we soften it a little bit by blending it in. Less extreme. So far so good. Looks like a tulip or an egg. I think this is making it look very egg-like because there's very closed parts of the blossom. We're going to start on our droplets. So when we make the droplets, you can have more droplets than I have, but you may not have fewer droplets than I have, okay? so keep that in mind. Droplets are almost never completely round, so go ahead and make some funky kinds of droplet shapes. So right now it looks like your tulip is a leopard frog hybrid. We're going to add in our highlights and shadows to make it look more like droplets and less like a leopard frog. So we're going to create a bright highlight underneath this curve over. The highlight's going to be on the bottom right-ish edge of your droplet. Taper off your pressure to blend it. The petal is casting a shadow over them. On top of that curved over part, the highlight, because the light is filtering through the water droplet and onto the leaf, the highlight's in the lower left. Takes up more of the droplet. So the light is refracting through the water as well. On the top part, we're going to have our highlights on the bottom edge. So it's almost like you're making little scribbly crescent moon shapes inside your droplets. I'm going to blend these a little bit, so if you don't have a cleaned part of your blending stump, make sure you do. So this is where you would use the end and just strategically blend it in, so it's softening it quite a bit. Still trying to keep the end on its side of the cone, right? So that it doesn't smudge and smoosh more than I want to. Because these are so small, it does go pretty quickly. Okay, so we've got our highlights blended and softened just a little bit. So let's go ahead and put our shadows in. So we're going to put the shadows opposite of the highlight using your charcoal pencil, scribbling with style. You want to blend these as well. When doing these tutorials, keep in mind that you do have to have as many droplets as I do, but you don't have to put them in the exact same spot, and they don't have to be the exact shape. Before I go too much further, I'm going to get some sandpaper so I can demonstrate to you how to use the sandpaper to clean off one of these blending stumps. Sandpaper is reusable, it's very durable, so please be careful with it, be considerate that other people need to use it. So to clean off your blending stump, you simply push the cone part of the end of it against the sandpaper until it sands away the compressed paper that has the black charcoal all over it. You do have to tap it every once in a while, just like you do your paper, to get the little pieces of paper and charcoal off of it. So getting that point again, you just have to put it at a slight angle. Sharpen this side as well. Okay, so I'm not holding the object with a lot of pressure because I don't want to break it in half. It is just paper. A little bit of pressure over time does the trick. Okay, and then it does get a little bit fuzzy, but that doesn't seem to impact what we're able to do with it. Okay, I'm going to clear off my workspace. Back to the tulip. You can also put droplets underneath the tulip and on the stem to increase the illusion. If it were at the start of a day, maybe it's just dew that's stuck to the top. If it's after a rainstorm, perhaps it is from rain and it's sticking off the bottom. So if I put droplets on the bottom, the different sizes, the gravity is going to start to pull them down. And then I could put some on the stem as well. Again, gravity's doing its thing. Put a little highlight. It's reflecting the light. We're going to add some cast shadows. That is the shadow created by the droplet on the flower. And we're going to add some refracted reflections using our white charcoal soap with the charcoal pencil. Follow the contour of the droplet, shade it in, contour. The shadows should all point down. Notice I'm not really pushing down super hard. It's not snapping. I'm gonna add some shadow here while I'm at it. Just a little bit. A little bit of shadow. The shadows can be pretty long too. I don't know if I would exaggerate it too much, but if the sun or the light source is high above, it could have longer shadows. And then for the refractive light, so the light that gets scattered after going through the droplet, just choose a point for each droplet, roughly in the same direction. And the light is refracting through the bubble and lighting up the surface it's sitting on. And if you don't blend your really firm white charcoal marks, they stand out because they have more contrast. So you can blend them a bit by feathering or lightening up your texture as you apply it to the paper. Remember, you're going to notice details about your artwork that the average viewer absolutely would not. So don't stress too much about being able to notice your pencil marks or if your blending is not quite perfect. We're not going for photorealism. We're going for realistic from an observation. One final tap and you're good to go. So remember, you can also do this on top of a colorful piece of construction paper to add a little bit more pop to your tulip.